Let's get started. If anybody needs to continue the conversations, you could take them outside or join the Occupy LA movement outside and express yourselves there. I'm Councilmember Jose Huizar. I'm the chair of the Public Works Committee. I'm joined today by Bernard Parks, and we will be joined shortly by Councilmember Mitch Englander. And on our agenda are three items. The first is the 6th Street Bridge. We have a vacation on item 2. If we could take item 2 on consent, if that's okay with Mr. Parks.
Fine.
Okay, item 2 will be on consent. And we will now go to item 3. Given that item 1 will take longer than item 3, we have Councilmember Bill Rosenthal here to speak on item number 3. So why don't we do this, first have staff come up and give a quick overview of what this item is. If the clerk will read the item into the agenda and then have staff give a quick presentation, then we'll go Councilmember Rosenthal and take public comment.
Item number 3 is a motion by Council Members Rosenthal and Councilmember Ham relative to acquiring the fee simple strip lots titled by voluntary dedication along Sepulveda Boulevard in Westchester at no cost to the city and waiving any fees associated with processing of this acquisition. This item is also referred to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Thank you very much. Is there staff here to give us a brief overview of this item?
I'm Katie Clark with the Bureau of Engineering. The motion is basically for 14 different parcels in CD 11 to voluntarily dedicate strips of, I think, sidewalk to the city and to waive all fees for that.
Excellent. Okay. Councilmember Bill Rosenthal, thank you for joining us.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to two of my distinguished colleagues.
That won't get you anywhere, Bill.
Some of you know, as you get off of the airport, out of the plane, and you come into the city, many people just go on Sepulveda. And you see a beautiful sign that says, "Welcome to Los Angeles." And the people in Westchester are very proud of Sepulveda and how it goes. But many of you also know it's probably the worst sidewalks in the whole city. I mean, they're so high up on each other like this, you can barely navigate it, and some of the trees are just completely fried. Well, Maxine Waters, and I just want to acknowledge that she put $1 million into our hands a few years ago to see if we could move forward with that project. With me, of course, are people from the neighborhood. There's Don Duckworth, who represents the bid there. We have John Rulin, who's head of this whole scape business that we have been working on, the Sepulveda Streetscape, for years. Before I even got in office, he was doing that. There's Jack Davis also here, and others from the YMCA, and Hamilton Cloud from Maxine Waters' office. And Karen is also here, too, Forte. So, dear colleagues, I ask for your support to approve fee waivers for the dedication of 14 private strip lots on Sepulveda Boulevard to the city. Believe it or not, the residents have to pay the city to acquire their land. I believe in this case it's justified to just waive this associated fees. This Sepulveda Boulevard streetscape project has been a work in progress, as I mentioned, for nearly a decade to fix what has arguably been the worst sidewalks in the entire city. Fortunately, in 2008, we received $1 million federal grant from Congresswoman Maxine Waters to provide landscape and streetscape improvements on the west side of Sepulveda Boulevard between 80th and 84th Street. This is the entryway for millions of passengers each year going to LAX and leaving LAX. In order to complete the project, 14 privately owned strip lots must be dedicated to the city so BOE can begin. My office has been working closely with BOE for nearly 2 years on this project, and BOE is nearly midway through their designs. Very generously, a nonprofit organization called the Westchester Streetscape Improvement Association, headed by John Rulin, who's here in the audience, have agreed to take over all maintenance responsibilities from the city once this project is complete. They have also agreed to pay for tree removal costs prior to the initiation of construction. In an effort to be as precise as possible, We ask that you move to amend my original motion, so it reads in the second paragraph. In this regard, property owners along the west side of Sepulveda Boulevard between 80th and 84th Street have been informed of an opportunity to dedicate, just giving it, these 14 strip lots to the city in order to support this joint project with the city. Initial design work of the streetscape improvements for the sidewalk, trees, and landscapes will be paid for by the city with federal grant dollars. Please remove the properties as legal lots that are not tied to residential lots. And in the last paragraph, therefore move that all city departments waive any fees associated with the processing of these acquisitions. If everything goes smoothly, our estimated projection timetable, February 2012, BOE completes the design work, receives authorizations to proceed with construction. March, Bureau of Engineering advertises the project, and July and August, we break the ground, and in December next year, Christmas time, New Year's time, or early January, the project will be completed. So I ask for your support on this.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal.
Thank you very much.
Very much. And we'll
Have a great afternoon.
You too. I'll see you Friday, council. Jack Davis. First public speaker, Jack Davis. After Jack Davis is John Rulin. Have a seat. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to defer to Mr. Rulin, who is the president of the Westchester Streetscape Improvement Association.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is John Rulin. I'm president of the Westchester Streetscape Improvement Association, and we've been working for over 10 years on this particular stretch of Sepulveda Boulevard. We're very pleased with what's happened in the business center, and that has done very well in developing that, and we want to continue that beautiful landscape that we've established there on up the street. The sidewalks here are very, very complicated to navigate. We have 3 churches, 2 schools, and 1 YMCA on this stretch of property. And the Y has had a number of people come in with bleeding knees, asking for help for Band-Aids and cleaning up because of the sidewalks that they've been on. I've submitted my letter, and at the end of it, we have a couple photographs of what the condition of the sidewalks are. Just to review that. And then on the last one, it has a picture of what the strip lot area is, where all this grassy area is, to give you an idea of what the strip lots are. The city has, forgot what the word is, up to 12 feet from the curb, and then the strip lots vary from 5 feet to 15 feet in size, and the length of them or the width of the property. We have come up with a meandering master sidewalk plan. All the ficus trees come out. We'll take the trees that we've planted in the business center and bring that up so that there's a continuation of the landscaping in that area. So we hope that you will waive the fees for these people who are willing to get their property to the city, and they're anxious to get rid of the trees because they're a huge issue to their backyard. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming here today. Mr. Rowland and Mr. Davis, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Don Duckworth and Karen Follett. And for the record, we've been joined by Mr. Englander.
We don't want to take any more of your valuable time than necessary. I think we just want to support the WISA project. The Business Improvement District Board has unanimously a number of times supported the project. We've provided a letter that the Homeowners Association that's dedicating these strip lots has written, reflecting their interest in dedicating the lots as a public-spirited effort to bring about these improvements. And they just want to see the money that we do have go to the landscaping improvements, not to pay fees that are really not a part of the ultimate project. So any questions we can answer?
The bid already has voted on this?
I'm sorry?
The bid has voted?
The bid has voted to approve this project, yes.
And to incur any costs?
No, it's outside the bid,
It's
so
outside the bid.
there is no
Okay, got
bid
it.
money.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm Karen Bradley Valletta with the YMCA, and I just want you to know that the Y is really supportive of trying to build beautify our neighborhood and to make it safe for all of our members and the kids that come to the Y.
Great, excellent.
Thank you very
Thank you very much. That concludes our public speaking segment. Any questions or comments from our members? We are on item number 3, Mr. Englander. Item 2 was on consent. To the BOE, you have any objections or any comments on this motion?
No.
No, okay. Mr. Parks?
I just want to comment on a couple of things. One, I don't think anybody could disagree with the project and certainly appreciate the Congresswoman moving forward on it. But having worked on over the last 5 years to get rid of the word waiver, and we've done that in the sense of special events, every council office has what we call a subsidy account that allows that, which started off as a developmental subsidies, but now it's been expanded to all subsidies. And I think from legal reasons, we were advised by the city attorney that waivers put us in some legal jeopardy where you can make a decision on who you subsidize, where if you're waiving fees, you are putting yourself in a position to where you normally can't pick and choose. And so one of the things, the development fee or the subsidy allows for a 50% use of the subsidy fee as long as the nonprofit has an operating budget of $5 million and below. And in my judgment, that would be a more appropriate manner in which to address the approximately $19,000 in fee waivers, as opposed to waivers creating using the council district subsidy funds to pay what the maximum that's allowable. Because I think it's, Paul, remind me, is it up to 50% or is it cut off at 50%?
It's up to 50%.
Up to 50%. So that would be my only concern. I think it's a great idea looking at the pictures. I think we all have sidewalks like that, and if we had money, all of us want to fix them. But I do think that having spent about 5 years figuring out how to keep us out of legal entanglements as it relates to waivers, that's why the council district development or the council district subsidy fees fund was created, and that would be my big concern.
Mr. Chairman, if the council office wants guidance, they can come to see me, and I'll help them with the development subsidy fee. There is a report that has to be done by the CAO, but we'll try to expedite it and get it through if they wish to go that route.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? So we'll move this item forward as is.
I had one, I'm sorry. Yeah, just going back to this for a second. On the project itself, I was just trying to get my arms around. This is currently not city property, and they wanted to donate it to the city. Was that correct?
It's easement. Mr. Rosenthal has
Can you walk me just through?
Yeah, that's the joy of it all, is the community people are donating the property to the city so that we can make the streetscape happen. It's been languishing for years and years, and the good news is Maxine put some money in it. And then the other side of the street, I was able to work with, as you all know, the Hughes project, where we went forward with that, which is helping us go forward with that. We'll actually get it done after these folks have been working for over 10 years on it. And so they're willing to donate it, no cost to the city, and they're willing to maintain it, but we're asking that the city just waiver those fees, which BOE has no problem with, and I think we should do that, and I would look for your support on it.
I hear you on that. Who's going to fix then the sidewalk? What's the plan to actually repair these?
The BOE people, they're doing it.
They're going to tear it all out?
Yes. Yeah, and frankly, there's funds enough to make it happen. And they're obviously in charge because you got the public right away and all that other kind of stuff. And they've worked with the design people on the development, and they're willing to start, if you look at the timetable on it, in February, which would be really great.
Mm-hmm. And then, okay, and how does this play into the city's financial policy on acquiring any new property without a maintenance or revenue stream? Because I know
that maintenance is coming from the community, from the streetscape group. They're going to do it.
They're going to fund the maintenance,
That's right.
The ongoing maintenance.
That's right.
And so then it sounds like Mr. Parks identified an opportunity where at least 50% of the funds then can be used to offset that full waiver if necessary.
We'll
Is that
see.
something you would support?
I would prefer to see how we can go with this at this point, talk with BOE, listen to what he has, and it's going to go before our budget committee as well, so. we'll have
Oh, it
to-
is?
Yeah.
Okay, that's more appropriate to talk about the fee waivers in the budget. Okay. Okay.
But this hasn't gone through Budget and Finance?
No.
No, okay.
But it still
so
is.
We're going to refer this to Budget and Finance, is that
Yeah.
correct? Okay.
But again, on its way, we'd like to have Paul meet with, dealing with the subsidy fee, because that's been a long, hard battle to get out of the waiver business.
Okay. So we'll move this item forward as is, and with the understanding that CLA is going to get together with Mr. Rosenthal at the Parks Office and just, or...
Yeah, we'll explain the process to him.
And talk about that other alternative for options.
Great.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. With no objections, so ordered. Next item.
Item number 1 is the Board of Public Works report relative to the 6th Street Viaduct Seismic Improvement Project.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Deborah Weintraub. I'm the Chief Deputy City Engineer for the Bureau of Engineering, and I'm here on behalf of the city engineer who sends his apologies. He's at the mayor's general manager's staff meeting, so unfortunately he had to miss the meeting today. We're here to ask for your consideration of approval of an EIR, EIS for the 6th Street Bridge project. And this is actually getting to this point to be in front of this committee is a culmination of many years of work, approximately 9 years of work, and a lot of detailed studies that you'll hear a little bit about in our presentation. I want to just take a moment to thank all the various agencies and people who helped us to get to this point. Most importantly, our local District 7 of Caltrans, the director, Mike Miles, his staff, who include Ron Kaczynski, Carlos Montes. I want to particularly thank the members of the Citizens Advisory Committee who have worked with us on this project since 2007. The BOE staff, you'll hear from some of them today, but particularly Jim Treadaway, who's the bridge program manager, and John Koo here to my right, who is the project manager for the 6th Street Viaduct. Staff from the Federal Highway Administration, Jacob Walklow, and then many others, community members, members of your staff, Councilman Weezar, who have been very supportive. Briefly, we're looking to get your consideration and action on a long-term solution to funding and replacement of the 6th Street Viaduct, and to turn it into a safe, state-of-the-art transportation and pedestrian corridor linking neighborhoods on the east and west side of the river. With that, I'll turn it over to John Koo to just briefly tell you about the project.
Good afternoon, council members. How are you? This first slide, you see the 6th Street Viaduct in aerial view. This is a tremendously important project for the city. It's the longest bridge owned by the city. Unfortunately, it has ASR, which I'll explain what that is later on. Most importantly, my opening remark is that we're in a race for time here. This project, this bridge is vulnerable, is suspect to a major earthquake, and we'll have a safety issue on our hands if we don't move forward quickly. Next slide. The public outreach participation process was significant on this project. This project is mainly funded by the Federal Transportation Bill Safety Lieu. Different from the previous bill, this bill required an elevated level of outreach, which is exactly what we've done here. We listed all the formal meetings we had. We had over 60 meetings on this project for the environmental phase. And I just want to touch on a couple of these. The most significant are the 11 Community Advisory Committee meetings we had from 2007 to 2011. The committee is comprised of 30 major stakeholders, so we had tremendous input from them, and some of them are here with us today, so I want to thank them for coming to this meeting. The other significant meeting, which was a turning point, is the Alkali Silica Reaction Workshop, bottom left. That meeting, we reach out to the world, the material experts on ASR, Alkali Silica Reaction. Basically, the conclusion was that there's not a cure for this cancer, if you will, of the concrete. Next slide. This slide presents the three major deficiencies of this bridge and the reason why we're replacing it. The first and foremost is the alkali silica reaction. It's rare, it's the only one in the city, and the reason why we have that in this particular bridge is because during the time of construction, because of the massive amount of concrete that's needed, they decided to ship the aggregates from Santa Barbara area by rail. There are rails alongside the river. So that was a decision that they made at a time. Unfortunately, the aggregate, or what we call reactive aggregates, today we would test for such thing and we would not allow for such thing to happen. But back then they didn't know as much. And basically the aggregate, the alkali in the aggregate reacts with the silica in the cement, in the sand, creates this gel-like substance. And in the presence of moisture, such as from the rain or from the ground, it percolates up the concrete. It allows the gel to expand and cracks the concrete. So here you see a core that we extracted from the concrete. And we took 88 such cores. Caltrans back in 2002 authorized a very rare one-time material testing program for this bridge because they knew this bridge had ASR. And throughout those 88 cores, we concluded with this pictorial down below that predominantly the entire structure has this disease. And the center photo that you see a lot of spider web in white. Those are the epoxy we've been injecting into the concrete to keep the structure intact and try to prevent the moisture from getting into the concrete, to prolong the service life of the structure as long as we could. So that's the first deficiency. The second is this is one of approximately 400 what we call Category 1 bridges remaining in California. California has about 22,000 bridges and only 400 remaining to be retrofitted. And these projects are different in that they're funded 100% with Proposition 1B. So that's, anyway, I'll get more into the funding later. But the seismic vulnerability of Category 1 bridge, together with the ASR, makes this bridge one of the most vulnerable in the state. As a matter of fact, the sufficiency rating on the structure is only 52 out of a score of 100. Very low in comparison to other bridges. And certainly it's the lowest in the city of LA. Lastly, is the third picture to the right is when they designed the bridge, due to various reasons, and actually the steel arches themselves, a kink is kind of forced into the alignment. And unfortunately, this kink is not to standard. So in today's codes, there are problems with the sight distances. So accidents tend to happen here. We've recorded several accidents here. And it is a geometric deficiency. So these are the three main deficiencies of the structure. Next slide. For the EIR, we always have to consider no action. And here really it's not an option for us because looking at the existing bridge, there's a
70% probability of failure in 50 years, compared to the standard design, which is 10% probability. So you're looking at a structure that's about 7 times more deficient than a new structure. So we look at alternative 2, which we study for a number of years, about 3 years to be exact. And looking at 10 different seismic retrofit alternatives, we concluded with this being the best option, which is what we call a heavy steel casing with infill walls. What's different with this retrofit versus the other historic bridge retrofits is that the other bridges we put in the infill walls, but we don't jacket the columns. Here you have columns with defective concrete, basically, so you can't dial into them. So we end up having to place heavy steel jacket around the columns, which make the columns bigger. So that's another problem. So basically, this option has a higher, what we call life cycle cost, because it doesn't get rid of the ASR. It has a 30-year design life. And in terms of life cycle cost, it is actually more expensive. And another problem with this is the substructure gets fixed, but the superstructure still has the ASR and is not addressed. So lastly, we heavily looked at replacement, which is our alternative 3 in the EIR. We looked at 20 different alignments. We boiled down to the 3 finalists. The 3 final alignments all shift to the north. Well, actually, one hugs the original alignment and 2 shifts to the north. The one in the center in red is our preferred alignment. It requires significant right-of-way takes, which I'll get into a little bit more later. As far as the bridge concepts, I guess that's the most controversial right at this point. We looked at 15 different bridge concepts, and through 18 different attributes, we narrowed down to 5 finalists. And the 5 finalists there are 3 arches and 2 what we call cable-supported structures. One of the arches, concept 1, is to replicate the original arch. But because today's cross-section, roadway cross-section standards, the bridge has to be wider, so it will not be an exact duplication. Next slide. This is a summary of the project. It's a $401 million project. The upper right-hand corner, it lists the benefits of any of the alignments. We have to provide a new cross-section, which would create the shoulder space and the medians and gets rid of the kinks. But most importantly, this is a multimodal structure improvement. The shoulders would accommodate bikes, and we would have wider sidewalks for pets. So give the pedestrian a better experience as they walk across this long viaduct. And lastly, the river access and enhancements. I want to touch a little bit on that. Bottom right-hand picture, it's a rendering. With this concept 4, which is our preferred concept, it does not have a pier at the top of the riverbank, unlike the current design. So it allows for potential bike paths and other improvements there. Some of you know that there's a tunnel here on the west side, so that tunnel gets improved as part of this project, and it can certainly provide access and ties in with the river improvements. Next slide. From an engineering standpoint, we look at constraints. I mentioned the 18 different attributes. The 3 main constraints are listed here, and which is driving the concept for the preferred alternative. Number 1, the proximity to railroad tracks. The railroad track that's closest to the riverbank is as little as 8 feet. So to do a major construction that could be as deep as 50 feet for the foundation, the railroads will be impacted, which is a main driving reason to span over the railroads. We have encountered problems in our First Street Viaduct project, and we certainly want to try to avoid it here. As far as the river, I mentioned the access and the pedestrian improvements and potential bike paths. Here, if we try to move the foundation closer into the river, then we start to encounter hydraulic issues. You certainly cannot have 3 piers in the river. One pier in the center of the river already maximizes the hydraulics. And lastly, the high voltage transmission lines. The preferred alternative with the cable towers is such that it happens to get around these high voltage, what we call non-redundant transmission tower system. So there's a benefit with the Concept 4. Next slide. Mitigation is part of every environmental document, and I like to emphasize these. The first one, the last one, I'll touch on in the next slide. The second is the public outreach. I mentioned tremendous public outreach on this project, and we're committed in the environmental document to carry this outreach program into the final design phase. Third item is river revitalization. I touched on the opportunities with improving the tunnel, the access, the pedestrian enhancements, the bike paths. And number 4 is unique. We under the environmental document, we are required to set up an aesthetic advisory committee. And this will be a very transparent process. The public will be involved to design the final look of the bridge. Again, the preferred alternative is an engineering solution to get around the main constraints. The architecture, which Deborah will get into more later, is also important, but the EIR does not get into the details of the architecture. So there's a process that's built into the environmental document for the final design phase to have this significant outreach and reaching out to define the architecture. And the next one is the documentary video motion picture, which would be required. This is something that we agree with SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office, to produce a 90-minute movie, if you will, on the LA River bridges because of our action to remove the 6th Street Viaduct. And this can be certainly a great thing for the city of Los Angeles in promoting our bridges and the river. And second to the last is a booklet to commemorate not just the 6th Street Viaduct, but the entire collection of bridges. Again, something that's great for everyone to look at. Now, next slide, please. Tremendous amount of intersection improvements. As part of this project, both sides of the river gets improvements. You get 4 new signals, 7 new phasing improvements, and 13 intersections under environmental justice, where we provide new decorative crosswalk landscaping. So there's treatment all around the site because we're closing the bridge during construction. Next slide. As far as property takes, I mentioned the bridge shifts to the north. There's tremendous amount of property takes here, up to 33 impacted properties, 11 business relocations, approximate cost about $100 million. Next slide. Here's a summary of costs for this project, $401 million. The city puts up 5.5, less than 1.5% of the project costs. Feds put in $365 million, and I mentioned Prop 1B earlier on. That's $30 million because it is a Category 1 bridge. On the right-hand side, we've been authorized by Caltrans $17 million for preliminary engineering, And we have tentative approval to begin final design pending the environmental document being approved. Next slide. Moving forward, the council meeting is set for Friday, and we certainly looking for your concurrence. Now I'd like to turn it over to Deborah to discuss the architectural aspects.
So we take no pleasure in demolishing or suggesting that a historic bridge be demolished, because it is part of a group of bridges that the city engineer Mel Butler designed over a period of years in keeping with the City Beautiful movement, which intended to give high-quality aesthetic treatment to major pieces of infrastructure across the country. And these were, our group of bridges are a wonderful and distinguished group of examples of the City Beautiful movement. But it is our contention that as we move forward, the design of the bridge should really reflect community concerns, the technology and engineering of this moment in time, and in fact, that is more in keeping with the intentions of the City Beautiful movement than a recreation of the historic bridge, which would not have any standing as a historic monument. I quickly want to go through some slides of recently completed bridges. Go to the next slide. So I'm sure you all heard about the Bay Bridge in Oakland. It was a historic monument being replaced by Cable Stayed Bridge. Next. And I'm not suggesting that our bridge will look like any of this. We've yet to begin this process of investigating what the aesthetics would be. The community would like us to look at making references either in material, in form, maybe in proportion to the historic bridges, and that should be all part of the discussion as we go forward. The next is a bridge in Greece that was completed not too long ago, connecting, going across a major river, connecting, as you can see, areas with great historic value. Next, I'm just quickly going through these in Istanbul, a bridge that, as you see, spans over important historic structure. This is just by way of saying it's possible to do sensitively done modern structures within historic context, and that's what we hope and intend to do here. Next. A bridge that was replaced, this ancient bridge, which is 2,000 years old, which is now only going to be used for pedestrians. The new bridge is a bridge that will be used for cars and bicycles, and makes reference in its arch form to the old bridge. Next. In France, a bridge that spans a river, or a valley and a river, one of the longest structures in the world. And then the Millennium Bridge, which is part of a grouping of bridges across the Thames. This modern bridge had the intention of keeping a very low profile, so it's a suspension bridge, but actually all the suspension elements are below the bridge. Next. A grouping of bridges that span many years in Tokyo from 24 to fairly recently 94, and it's this community of bridges that we hope we can achieve here. Next. Under construction, this Willamette River Bridge, which is part of about 11 bridges in the city of Portland that were built over a long period of time. And the modern bridge, actually this one's interesting because it doesn't carry private vehicles. It's for their public transit system, but no private vehicles, pedestrians and public transit. Next. And then the proposed design, lastly, for the Gerald Desmond Bridge, which will replace the bridge on the bottom right. So in closing, I just would say that as we move forward, we intend to work very closely with the council office and the community to come up with a design using modern technology and modern aesthetics that will add to the grouping of bridges that exist across the LA River through downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments before I go into public comment?
Yeah, I had a couple, but I'll refer it to Sparks first.
No, I was just going to say, we dealt with this yesterday, or Monday, at the Budget and Finance, and I hope we can coordinate and get both of these on the same agenda, so we can deal with the financial package and the EIR. And all of my comments deal with the issue of the finances and ensuring that they are as tight as possible because of the dependence on federal and state transportation funding, And as I've said Monday, it's absolutely essential that we protect the general fund and have some levers involved where if unforeseen circumstances occur and money is cut short at midstream or 1/3 through, that the city has the ability to adjust appropriately, because I believe we're going to be moving forward on something in the neighborhood of $98 million worth of MICLA funds to create cash flow, and those are some major decisions if we're not assured of getting all the money back, or we're not assured all the money's forthcoming. And so those are the same concerns, and we'll probably hear them again at council, more so than the EIR. The issue is the dollars.
In response to those concerns, which we understand completely, we did provide you with a kind of 2-page summary of the status of the funding with the federal government. And I know that Councilmember Englander, you were concerned whether we could give 100% guarantee that the federal funding would be forthcoming, which is not possible for us to do. But it does look like if the funding is continued at the level which it is today and will be, they're talking about for next fiscal year, this bridge will be covered. It's not an earmarked project. It's part of the formula funds that are distributed to California. And with the commitment letter we signed with Caltrans as the state representative, we believe they're making a commitment to fund this project.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I know, and I saw the letter here, I know this committee is not the Budget and Finance Committee, which I voted no on yesterday, just for the record, because we don't have the 100% guarantee. It's not, that's a big, I'm a gambling man, but at $100 million, and I know the price tag keeps going up. In fact, if I refer to the document here, it says stamped item number 1 from the Board of Public Works, signed by Arlene Taylor. Do you have a copy of this?
Not with me, I'm sorry.
It says here in the fiscal impact, this is just to give you an idea, those who are watching this, that the project's proposed budget is now $401 billion.
No, that's a mistake.
I know it's a mistake.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, the price keeps going up.
No.
We've got to act quickly. Do you see that? It says billion?
Yes, that was a typo. I'm sorry.
It's a big typo.
Yeah.
Yeah. A billion here.
A billion there, then you have real money, I know.
Sooner or later, we're talking about real money. All right.
I'm sorry.
Having said all that, this committee is tasked with the effort of approving the design, which, and it was stated in your opening that the final design is not yet final. So I'm not sure what the process is to finalize that. If we send this on to council, which I guess timing-wise we've got to do in keeping with the 10-year authorization, sending it forthwith to council, then what does it come back with a final design approval through Public Works, or who's the body that would ultimately approve that? And since there's a expert historic preservationist in the room as well, maybe Ken wants to weigh in on that. I'm not sure what do we do in terms of the approval process on a final design.
Well, the final design will be will go through the community, the Aesthetic Advisory Committee. It will also be required to go in front of the Cultural Affairs Commission, as all public projects do. We're also required through the EIR to vet the final design with SHPO, the State Office of Historic Preservation.
And since the head of Cultural Affairs is here, can you weigh in on that as well, Mr. Bernstein, in terms of where you're at in what's come forth so far and your comfort level?
Sure. Ken Bernstein with the Department of City Planning and staff to the Cultural Heritage Commission. I would mention we have one of our commissioners, the vice president of our Cultural Heritage Commission, Roella Louie, who is going to speak on behalf of the commission in a moment. But just procedurally, and I can come back and speak about some of the substance of the issue, I think the concern from the Cultural Heritage Commission and our staff is related to the certification of the environmental impact report. Clearly, once the EIR is certified, there is going to be the opportunity to work through additional refinements to the design and to work with the aesthetics committee and other agencies. I would point out the Cultural Affairs Commission is separate from the Cultural Heritage Commission. The Cultural Affairs Commission reviews all public projects and in essence, a more generalized design review, whereas the Cultural Heritage Commission, which is part of the planning department, would be reviewing impacts to a historic cultural monument, a designated historic cultural monument. So those are two separate reviews. The concern is that once the EIR is certified, however, that does put constraints on how the project can change, and the Cultural Heritage Commission is supporting a different design alternative, some alternatives that were studied in the environmental impact report but are not the preferred alternative being put forward by BOE.
And was that a cost issue in terms of the different design, or was that a community input perspective?
It was a combination of issues. It was one, cost, where the proposed, the alternative that Cultural Heritage is supporting is potentially up to $100 million. So the letter we got from the Cultural Heritage Commission made some suggestions about ways they thought that we could reduce that cost differential. They also made reference to a vote that the Community Advisory Committee made in 2007, where two-thirds of the committee voted for a historic replication. But we had many meetings after that, all the way up to 2011, where we discussed options for modern designs. And though we didn't officially take another vote, there was a lot of support for doing a modern bridge, which made reference in terms of proportion, size, material, color to the other historic bridges in the neighborhood. So those were the primary concerns. Also, we are going to be doing much longer spans than the existing bridge. We're going to be using up-to-date technology and engineering we can build better bridges now to withstand earthquakes better and to survive longer than the bridges did from that period of time. We're going through a process of restoring and renovating a lot of them at this point. So it's a combination.
Okay, and then the last thing that I had is one of the things that I'd asked for to come back to this committee was, and I don't see it, it's not in the two-page, and that was really on project funding, was the list of bridges where we're at citywide and any other ones that are listed on Caltrans mandatory seismic retrofit list of urgency and where we're at on taking sort of that approach. I know that some of that relates back to the budget concerns that Mr. Parks had brought up moments ago, but it also relates to the idea that if we are leveraging $100 million in MICLA financing and taking a risk with the federal government and creating a partnership with Caltrans, and I'll leave that one alone for a moment, what are we doing to jeopardize other projects, and how many are there, and what are we looking at? And so I didn't see that come back.
Actually, Councilmember, we did deliver to your office yesterday our Bridge Improvement Program monthly report, which lists the 50-odd projects that we are currently working on. And I'm sorry I didn't bring a copy of that with me today. Yeah.
Is this a document that's published online?
Is it posted online? On the BOE website?
Okay. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and review this, and we'll have time, obviously. This comes Friday. The council is what set
Yes.
for?
We'd be happy to come brief you on this.
Okay. And then my only final question was, in terms of process, if this is actually approved, and I meant to ask this in budget, assuming it's approved by council and it moves forward, does that then set the path where it doesn't come back again? Does that give the green light to go out and actually start the financing, assuming the EIR is certified and approved, and it just doesn't come back again? At that point, we start the process and the project?
All of the bridge projects that are the 50-odd projects that are in our monthly report are overseen by the Seismic Bond Committee. And every step that we take, we are issued a release basically by Caltrans to go to the next step. So what the EIR will allow us to do is have Caltrans give us authority to proceed to final design. We don't get authority to proceed to construction from Caltrans until they've approved and accepted the design plans. And we report monthly to the Oversight Committee, which is a committee that's chaired by the CAO with members of the Mayor's office and the CLA's office on it.
I could follow up on that. So I would imagine there's different phases of this project that will come back to council for us to vote on, such as CIEP or some other budget allocation. We're going to vote on those as they come back to us, correct? I mean, there's going to have an allocation to this.
No, I'm going to defer to the CAO
Or
on
is this
that.
just, are we doing this all at once?
Yeah.
No, we got it. No, let me just comment. In budget, I think there was a direction that to mitigate the risk that the city engineer should report to the council before executing a construction contract. And then we also asked that the CAO work with Bureau of Engineering to keep the hiring numbers down to a minimum while we're going through this process.
Yeah.
And the question that Mr. Englander asked of the design, when do we have, or will this council, and, I mean, my office is, we're involved in this, and you know, we're working closely, but in terms of having the full council review the final decision on the design, does that come back to us?
We're more than happy to bring it back to you. I don't know that there's a procedural requirement that is, but we're more than happy to bring it back.
I got one last.
Okay, and so this is the certification of the EIR. There is no other project approval process that we have for the bridge? No. There's a certification of the EIR, and then all these other committees and
Other city procedures, like the Cultural Affairs Commission.
Oh, okay. And from the city end, the different funds that you have identified as sources, those monies are already earmarked for this bridge, or you're...
That's correct. The final design, it's 88% paid for by federal government, and matching 11% is by Measure R, which is already allocated.
So all those local monies have already been earmarked?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
On the Category 1 projects, or 4.0 seismic projects, how many total bridges are in that category citywide?
When we started in 2002, there was about 18. There were about 18. And we completed several of those. There's still some on the table. We're in various phases. Some are in construction, some are in design. But all those Category 1 projects are 100% paid for by grants. There is no city match. It's the federal highway money, 88%, 12% Prop 1B.
So, and the total cost of all those, I guess the 6 that are in construction and the 8 that are in design, is anticipated to be roughly what?
Of the Category 1.
You're referring to the costs?
Yeah, do you know that?
I don't have the number. We can certainly get that to you.
We could get that for you. We could calculate that and get it to you.
Okay. Well, I mean, I heard that at one point, all those outstanding projects currently in design and the ones that are in process round up to roughly $1 billion.
Well, the bridge improvement program is roughly $1 billion, but the Category 1s are some subset of that, so we'd have to calculate that number.
I see. So the entire bridge program is roughly $1 billion.
Right.
Where this one's $400 million for one.
It's a big part of it.
Yes, clearly.
Yes.
Just trying to put things into perspective. Yes. And taking it back to, going back to that risk, but again, I think that was stated yesterday. So the design element, though, that would be coming back, it doesn't come back to this committee. And so I guess we'll go into public comment when the chairman's ready to hear what any concerns were from the design element part, which is the primary part of what we're dealing with, I guess, today. So, okay.
My final question before we go to public comment. What other bridges in the city do we have with similar ASR problems?
This is the only one.
This is the only one.
This is the only one.
And in your opinion, is this one of the most drastic problems we could have with bridges, or are there some other things that other bridges have that are just as problematic, that give it the urgency as this one?
Yeah, this one is especially critical because of the combined seismic Category 1 and the ASR. The other ones are just Category 1 alone.
And who did you work with to determine the ASR issue? Do we have someone in-house, or did we have outside analysis?
It was the reaching out to the rural experts, Caltrans, Federal Highways, other material scientists. We had a one-day workshop where we invited everybody, including the CHC and the Office of Historic Resources.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's go to public comment. I'll name off 3 people at a time. If you could come up and take a seat here, and then we'll go through the following 3, etc. Adrian Scott Fine, Alex Ward, and Louis Macaraba. No, can you correct me on your last name, sir? Louis? What's your last name, sir? McAdams. Okay. That's okay. So Adrian Scott Fine, Alex Ward, and Louis McAdams.
Good afternoon, members of council. Adrian Scott Fine, Director of Advocacy for the Los Angeles Conservancy. The Conservancy is an ardent and passionate supporter and advocate for the city's extraordinary collection of historic bridges spanning the LA River. Since 2007, the Conservancy has been advocating for really a preservation-based approach for the 6th Street Bridge as the last built, the largest, and the most famous and recognized of the river bridges, in many ways taking on iconic status of its own. We now know and recognize that rehabilitation is not possible given the extraordinarily unique circumstances, in this case with the ASR condition. Given this reality, we think it is important, though, to think of, plan for, and consider the LA River bridges as a cohesive ensemble where context matters a lot. These bridges were designed to complement one another. A new 6th Street span should do the same and continue this tradition, rather than be designed as a standalone bridge that divorces itself from the overall collection of historic bridges. For these reasons, the Conservancy cannot support the current preferred alternative. The design approach for the 6th Street Bridge should complement rather than, as envisioned in the preferred alternative, overshadow the rest of the bridges along the LA River. The Conservancy instead supports along with the Cultural Heritage Commission a modified main span replication alternative which has an opportunity to meet the project objectives and offer a reasonable and appropriate compromise approach. So we urge your support on this. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Louis McAdams from Friends of the Los Angeles River. I just want to speak briefly and actually, if possible, cede my time to Alex Ward, who's an architect and a member of the board of Friends of the LA River. Friends of the Los Angeles River supports the Bureau of Engineering's preferred bridge concept 4 insofar as it would remove the piers that currently stand on both riverbanks adjacent to the railroad right-of-ways. In the short run, this would open space for bicycle access along the riverbanks when the new bridge is done. In the long run, it would allow space to widen the river channel for increased flood detention and provide more room for the river. This is Alex Ward.
Alex Ward, Friends of the LA River. As Deborah Weintraub pointed out a few minutes ago, the existing 6th Street Bridge is an exceptional, graceful, and classic work of engineering design, and it's certainly a beloved and recognized symbol of the LA River, downtown Los Angeles, and the connection, vital connection between downtown Los Angeles and Boyle Heights. We of the Friends of the LA River urge that any replacement bridge of the existing bridge be a structure of equal grace, equal distinction, and one that can act as a new symbol of LA and its river in the 21st century. A forward-looking bridge rather than a backward-looking bridge. The new design should also support the goals of the 2007 LA River Revitalization Master Plan for river restoration, for open space creation, for improved river access and community improvement along the river. We urge that the new design be realized through a design competition sponsored by the Bureau of Engineering, which can be based on the findings of the current EIS that you're being asked to approve, but should achieve a daring design of world-class distinction and go beyond what has been envisioned to date. We think that the City of Los Angeles and its river deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those comments. Mark Spilo, Eric Lindeback, Estella Lopez.
I have long-term employees with me. May I have them join me at the table?
Sure. Stella, if you don't mind, we'll get right to you after these folks here.
I'll be the only one speaking.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair and members, my name is Mark Spilo. I'm president of Spilo Worldwide here in the downtown Arts Industrial District, and I have with me today two long-term employees, both of whom reside in the Boyle Heights neighborhood. Mrs. Irma Escobar commutes in by car, and Mr. Ronnie Duran by bus. We are a manufacturer, importer, and distributor of over 3,000 beauty supply products. We sell our products in the United States and over 45 countries overseas. We've been a Los Angeles company for 70 years and a fixture in downtown Los Angeles for nearly 3 decades now. We currently have approximately 85 employees. Our company is located at 6th Street in Santa Fe, literally within the shadow of the 6th Street Bridge. I've followed the proposed project for many years that it has taken the Bureau of Engineering to get to the place they are today. I've been a part of the Bureau's Public Advisory Committee for the project from the very beginning. I commend the Bureau staff for its diligence and its public engagement throughout this long and complex process. Our property is one of several that is identified in the EIS for potential acquisition and relocation. It's our objective, however, to remain where we are and to continue operating during the bridge demolition and construction period. The Bureau of Engineering staff has assured us that they share that objective. Our understanding is that the Bureau is working with space planning consultants to identify logistical alternatives that would permit us to continue operations. I will say that our questions submitted were not adequately answered during the public comment period of the EIR. If we're forced to relocate, it would necessarily be to another city. The fact is there are no plausible alternative sites for a facility like ours in the Los Angeles industrial zone. Forcing Spilo to relocate outside the city would be a significant loss to the city and, frankly, a significant loss to Spilo. We're a Los Angeles company, and we want to remain a Los Angeles company. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and rest assured that we will work with you on some of your objectives, and I'm sure the department shares as well, the Bureau shares as well.
And they are. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Eric Lindeback, and I'm with Softy Rabina's Architects. Throughout our 20 years of experience working in the field of bridge architecture, we have explored many bridge type replacement projects with several different communities. Very often is the case where a strong relationship develops between a bridge and the community it serves. Over the passage of time, the 6th Street Bridge has provided a backdrop to many events that showcase a particular image of the city of Los Angeles. It's evident that the bridge's architectural detailing, elegant forms have both endeared it to the community with a sense of nostalgia and pride. We're now in a period of history where many bridge structures either lack the ability to adapt to the current needs of the community or have reached the end of their useful life structurally. Therefore, they're in need of replacement. Since the Los Angeles River slices through the urban fabric, it has created an important collection of bridges that's left deep and lasting memories. As one of the first structures to be replaced, the 6th Street Bridge replacement provides us with the opportunity to envision how the future bridge replacements should respond to current urban visions that include the restoration of the river, the reinvention of downtown Los Angeles, and the creation of new memories for future generations to come. The new 6th Street Bridge should utilize state-of-the-art architecture and engineering technology to achieve the highest level of performance, as well as create a lasting pathway that will symbolize the future. We do not believe that history should be reproduced or copied. The challenge will be to keep the spirit of the 6th Street Bridge intact while transforming it into a new modern structure that carries presence equal to the original bridge. The bridge replacement should be expressive of the historical value of the original bridge while expanding upon the imagery to present a new iconic image for future generations of Angelenos. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for your comments. Estella Lopez, Roella Say Louis, and Christopher Martin.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Estella Lopez, the Executive Director of the Central City East Association. For 25 years, the voice of industrial downtown. CCEA has been a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee of this project since its inception. We've provided oral feedback at the CAC meetings, as well as written comments on the draft EIR. But we still have some concerns about the final EIR, which is why I'm here today. We don't believe that any of those concerns would prevent the project from proceeding. We simply ask that our concerns be addressed and remedied by staff, and that the letter that I'm going to submit to the clerk be made part of the official record. Our concerns are outlined in detail in that letter, but I'll touch on each one of them just briefly. Concern number one, the EIR contains repeated references to the industrial land use policy as a basis for land use decisions. CCEA vigorously objects to this. Councilman Weezer, you know the history of this issue. The industrial land use policy was administratively developed, never discussed, never debated, or adopted by council. In the case of the EIR, for example, this policy is cited as the reason to prohibit post-construction remnant parcels to be developed as parks on either the Boyle Heights or the downtown banks of the river. That's a serious concern for us. So we very seriously ask that all references to the industrial land use policy be removed from the EIR, and that the question of whether or not future park uses would be appropriate be deferred to the community plan update. Number two, there is no acknowledgement in the EIR that the Arts District is a mixed-use community, nor that there are now large numbers, thousands of residents living within a half a mile of the proposed project on both sides of the 6th Street Bridge. Councilman, you know how important that reference would be. Number three, we ask for direct acknowledgement of the CAC in the EIR, as well as a written commitment that the CAC will be included in the future discussions contemplated in the EIR. I'm almost done. And finally, street closures. They can have a crippling effect on businesses immediately adjacent to the bridge, but also they can have a ripple effect on traffic at surrounding intersections. Councilman, you know, Alameda Street, Central Avenue, lots of jobs, lots of industrial businesses there. We know there's going to be an impact. We are supportive of this project, and we're going to work with the city, but the city has to remember that the truck traffic, the portal that Alameda and Central Avenue are for goods movement on the east side of downtown cannot be violated beyond a certain point. So we need your support on that the mitigation measures be strictly adhered to. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you also for your point on the land use policy, which you're correct. We made some adjustments in that area so that we expanded the Arts District community plan, so we would continue with some of the revitalization with a flexibility on what we put up in those areas and the land use pattern. So we'll follow up on that as well. Thank you very much. Roella?
Yes.
Louis?
Roella Louie, Vice President of the Cultural Heritage Commission. Formerly, as you know, I had a long career in the city as Director of Grants, Planning, and Public Arts for the Cultural Affairs Department, and I also was Deputy Director for Workforce Development in the Community Development Department. In my role, our commission has the oversight of historic monuments, which are number in 1,000. For most historic monuments, our commission has the ability to object formally to the issuance of a demolition permit and to delay demolition in order to facilitate a preservation solution. However, in this case, the city-sponsored project, the actual demolition permit is no actual demolition permit is required, and so our commission must turn here to the City Council as the decision maker on this matter. The commission has been working closely with the BOE staff for over 3 years on the project. We have been educated on concrete cancer alkali silica reaction, or ASR, and we recognize that the bridge has serious structural deficiencies that need to be addressed. However, we are dismayed that we will be entirely losing a tremendously significant historic cultural monument. The 6th Street Bridge is perhaps the most iconic of our LA River bridges. It is recognized throughout the city as a symbol of Los Angeles and is, in fact, one of the most filmed in Los Angeles. We held a public hearing on the EIR on November 3rd, and as a commission, we voted 5-0 to oppose the BOE's preferred alternative and to support instead the other bridge concepts that were developed in the project EIR. The Cultural Heritage Commission is disappointed that the project team has selected, may I continue, the preferred alternative that will demolish the 6th Street Bridge and replace it with a new cable-supported bridge of contemporary design. The result is the irreparable loss of a historic cultural monument and a major blow to the city's collection of this ensemble of bridges. And the Cultural Heritage Commission does not take lightly the loss of a historic monument. This doesn't happen every day. Aside from a folk art piece called Tower of Wooden Palace, the City of Los Angeles has not seen an EIR-approved demolition of a historic cultural monument for nearly 20 years. It is particularly regrettable that a historic resource under the control of city government itself could attain this unfortunate distinction. We believe that a replacement alternative should be done in the spirit of reconstruction, potentially complying with the Secretary of Interior's standards of reconstruction. There are 2 options that were studied in the EIR that we do support. We support bridge concept number 1, main span replication, which BOE stated in the EIR meets all of the project goals. The alternative would replicate most elements of the current main span and resurrect original architectural features lost as the decorative double piers. Additionally, we support the abutment replication 1A with modifications to render the alternative value, what we called in our letter 1A modified. The alternative has been withdrawn for further consideration by the BOE, as it would require reconstruction of piers in a railway area with potential right-of-way and easement issues and would appear to be significantly more costly. At our commission meeting, we discussed with BOE and shared with a representative of the mayor's office a modified option under which the project would eliminate nearly half of the substructure piers on the bridge, resulting in reduced costs of materials and construction. Instead of a complete reconstruction, this alternative would result in a 70%, 80% replication guided by the Secretary of Interior's standards of reconstruction. As a partial preservation treatment, the iconic steel arches on the center span would be salvaged and reincorporated back into the original location. Finally, the commissioners felt strongly that this project should be considered from the standpoint that the 6th Street Bridge is the centerpiece of an ensemble of remarkable historic bridges along the Los Angeles River. It's much like looking at the legs of a table and you take one away, that really impacts the visual beauty of this iconic ensemble of bridges. The proposed modern design does not take into account the relationship of the bridge to other historic LA River bridges and would be too visually intrusive. In coming forward with creative modifications of the proposed alternatives, we are reaching out for compromise, something that I think we all need to consider in this time of reduced resources and bringing together people of all perspectives. This compromise approach to this project addresses the significant structural needs while also recognizing the significance of this iconic bridge. I really thank you for your consideration this morning, and I'd like to see if Ken could come up and add anything.
Sure, he's submitted a card, so he'll come up after our
Thank
next
you so
speaker.
much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments. Christopher Martin?
Council members, my name is Christopher Martin. I'm CEO of AC Martin. We're architects. In fact, we're in one of our buildings. This LA City Hall was designed by my grandfather and John Parkinson and John Austin in 1927. And I was the architect for the historic renovation of this building, which we conducted from 1992 to 1999. And presently doing the building across the street, the old Hall of Justice, which is used to be courthouses and jails, and now it's going to be DA and sheriff's headquarters. And it's familiarity with historic restoration and salvaging is one of the things I do. And I also understand reactive aggregates. These bridges are wonderful, old, beautiful bridges, but the diagnosis of the cancer in the 6th Street Bridge is fatal. And I support the conclusion that they've arrived at, that we have to take it down. So I would endorse that you remove it and keep in mind the significant transportation element that it provides and the clearance over the existing rail right-of-ways, which are so important to our commerce. So time is important. Quickly acting on it before a seismic event, which would really be destructive, is important. And then the question is about replacement. I see no point in trying to replicate old architectural ideas in this character. You've got other bridges there that are wonderful examples. This is an opportunity to do something that's light, that's not impacting into the environment underneath. You've got communities that are there now that didn't used to be there. You have rail right-of-ways and all that could really take advantage of longer spans. I would do something that is contextually compatible with the neighborhood and with the other bridges, but not limit yourself. Those types of limits really throw too much effort into the design side and don't honor the cost side and the time schedule. To conclude, time, design, and money must be kept in equal balance. I think you'd really be going down the wrong track if you honor just design. This is coming from an historical architect. Don't honor just design and get caught up in the trap of a design competition. You'll blow the budget and you'll blow the time schedule. So hire good consultants on a qualifications-based selection basis. Talk about lightweight. Talk about the communities, the river underneath, the bikeways, the pedestrian elements that didn't used to be there. Incorporate those elements in a new design. If it's a suspension bridge, I think that's fine. Be beautiful. You've got one of the largest design communities in the world right here in Los Angeles. Let them do a good job for you for a good budget. So, in conclusion, you have to take it down. Do it timely, do it cost effectively, and use the resources that you have at hand in the design community and engineering community to do something that's really first rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate them. And thank you for your work on this historic building here that we're in. My grandfather actually worked as a laborer where he had mules go down and dig the ditch, get the mud, and pull the mules up with the...
Well, a lot of us have had done work here for a long time, and family members, Eric Garcetti, the same. So it's a great building. This was economically viable to do.
So your grandfather, who actually designed this building?
the three architects, John Parkinson, John Austin, and A.C. Martin, together were a partnership to do this building. And the actual design is really a collaboration of the three. There's not one individual, although John Austin's work is really exemplary and Parkinson's work is really exemplary. I see a lot of copies, a lot of their influences and everything. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Parks has to leave, but he said he'll mark his vote on this before he leaves, so we'll have that. Thank you. We have two more public speakers, Ken Bernstein and Gary Lee Moore. Oh, Gary Lee Moore is not a public speaker, but he's... I was going to let you speak either way, Mr. Moore. You could, you don't have to try to sneak in here as a...
No. Yeah, well, I do.
Mr. Bernstein?
Yes. Good afternoon again. Ken Bernstein with the City Planning Department Office of Historic Resources. I want to pick up on some of the comments our Commissioner Roella Louie made a moment ago and elaborate on them. This has been a very difficult issue for our commission and the professional staff of our office. We normally, in terms of historic preservation practice, do not endorse replication or reconstruction or recreation of historic elements. And what sets this apart, however, are a few factors. One is the iconic nature of this particular bridge. The 6th Street Bridge is the longest and potentially the most iconic of all of the ensemble of the Los Angeles River bridges. In addition, it is only threatened because of this concrete condition, the ASR condition. And we, in looking at this, believe that obviously without regard to that condition, this bridge would have many decades of remaining an iconic bridge in Los Angeles. So in looking to precedents in terms of historic preservation practice, we looked at a couple that we think are very instructive. One is the Hollywood sign. The Hollywood sign was declared a historic cultural monument in 1972, and by 1978 the sign was crumbling, again a materials condition in which the sign could no longer remain an icon of Los Angeles. Another city department, the Recreation and Parks Department, came forward with a proposal to entirely replace the Hollywood sign with new materials in 1978, and that was approved by the Cultural Heritage Board because there was no alternative. It was an iconic landmark. There was no alternative. It remains a historic cultural monument today with all new materials. Another example is in Pasadena, the very equally iconic Arroyo Seco Bridge, the Colorado Street Bridge spanning the Arroyo Seco in Pasadena. Very different. It didn't have the ASR condition, very different set of circumstances. But from 1991 to 1993, that bridge was taken down. The entire deck of the bridge was reconstructed. The columns, the spandrel columns of that bridge were entirely reconstructed. Our commission reviewed the photos of what was done to that bridge. That bridge remains a local landmark in Pasadena, remains listed in the National Register of Historic Places, and was a substantial reconstruction. There are standards for reconstruction that are part of the Secretary of the Interior's standards for treatment of historic properties. Obviously, our truly preferred alternative would be a strict adherence to those standards for reconstruction. But the alternative that the Cultural Heritage Commission has put forward is, as Commissioner Louie indicated, a compromise, recognizing that there are constraints that you heard regarding the spanning of the river, regarding the high voltage power lines, other factors that will make it necessary to deviate from that to some degree, but using those standards for reconstruction as a starting point and finding design refinements that allow the project objectives still to be met while retaining the historic character of this bridge and retaining its iconic status is the alternative that's being supported by the Commission. And finally, I would just add, the Commission has strongly urged, in the discussion that we had at our commission hearing in this room a couple of weeks ago with other members of the public, that this really needs to be looked at by the council within the context of looking at the bridges as a collection, as an ensemble, as really kind of a de facto historic district, and looking at looking at this through the prism of what constitutes appropriate design of the bridge with respect to the collection of other significant Los Angeles River bridges. So, we don't believe it's a question of looking forward versus looking backward. We really are trying to struggle with how to best celebrate this really unparalleled ensemble of historic bridges in the city and come up with an alternative that at least we think, if done right, has a chance of retaining the historic character and historic eligibility of perhaps the most iconic of the collection. So, happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments.
Can I ask a real quick question? How would you suggest we as a committee do that, to bring you into the mix to weigh in on those design elements?
Well, again, our suggestion has been to, again, we're concerned about the certification of the EIR with the preferred alternative. We are suggesting the certification of the EIR with what we're calling a modified Bridge Concept 1A, which is the commission-supported alternative. It was included in the EIR, but we are suggesting that the EIR be certified with another preferred alternative, and then to work on refinements of the design as had been suggested by BOE with the Aesthetics Committee, Cultural Affairs
we
Department,
simply
and so on.
amended it to include that as just yet another alternative in the EIR to address, and then it can be addressed later, correct, and make that recommendation from committee? So we can approve it with that change?
I understand that we certify the EIR and we still have some flexibility on the alignment and the actual design. So would it make any real difference, however we word that as we move forward?
He's saying if it's part of an alternative, right?
When you certify the EIR, and I'm not an expert on the EIR, I might ask some of my consultants to come up. Would help me on this.
Is it, so, for clarification, is what you're suggesting, Ken, is that part of one of the alternative options now addressed in the EIR?
It's a hybrid.
It's a hybrid, right, but is it identified, though, as a hybrid?
It is not identified as a hybrid in the EIR as it's currently rented. The Cultural Heritage Commission suggested this hybrid following their hearing. But my understanding is if you certify the EIR, you certify a preferred alternative, then we're going to move forward with that preferred alternative and refining that design option. And the preferred alternative is a bridge. It's a different structural system than the current bridge. So it wouldn't end up looking like the current bridge.
Yeah, my name is Carlos Montes. I'm with Caltrans Division of Environmental Planning. We certified the NEPA, the EIS portion of the document. It was a partnership with the city. So changing the preferred alternative would reopen the environmental document at some point. So.
You say reopen, but it's not certified yet.
Well, in terms of the federal portion, the EIS.
It would take time to go back through the federal certification, it is what he's saying, if you certified a different preferred alternative, because they've already cleared the document as it's currently written.
It's a joint document with Caltrans Federal Highway and the city because of the federal funding.
So, Ken, any rebuttal on thoughts in terms of that?
Before maybe Linda.
Yeah.
Linda,
thank
speak
you.
on behalf of
Thank
BOE.
you. Yes, I'm Linda Moore. I'm an environmental supervisor for the Bureau of Engineering involved with this project. 1A, which is being referred to, was not fully evaluated in the EIR. It was considered in response to comments on the draft EIR. That's the full replication, abutment to abutment, with all the many piers and columns. It was considered in response to comments. When it was realized that it was substantially more expensive and would require recirculation of the EIR because we would have to do a full evaluation of all of those impacts, which was not done, so that 1A was not carried forward as a full evaluation. If that were to be the direction to go in at this point, we would have to prepare a supplemental EIR. And as Mr. Montez said, they would have to reopen the NEPA as well.
Is it considered significantly different?
It's my understanding that and the rest of the staff can correct me, but that it is significant. It would require the evaluation because it wouldn't be a true replication. It would still be on that new alignment and the wider bridge, and because it would have a lot more columns than what the preferred alternative has, that could actually result in impacts that have not been identified. But those evaluations have not been conducted.
Can I just ask this then? My recommendation would be to approve it as presented to this committee, but when it comes to council on Friday, to address this specific issue, to see if it can be amended to include these recommendations from cultural heritage, and also to find out if, as an alternative, not as a change, but just as an identified alternative in the EIR, and that way there's an option in this hybrid for the design element, and then with that, but to bring back to council on Friday, if it reaches the significant level where those changes that were just described, where you'd have to go back and recertify and go through all of the partners in this, obviously would cause tremendous financial burden and time, and I get that. So if you can report back that from a legal perspective, and perhaps we can have a city attorney report back on the, or probably the planning department, quite frankly, if it's not significant, if it can be done without reaching that level of significance for change that would trigger that, or if it's simply a matter of some basic design changes that can be identified or incorporated. And I think that would be reasonable.
Okay. Mr. Moore.
Good afternoon, Gary Moore. I just wanted to qualify my understanding of what the committee just asked for. The option that we just spoke about would add $100 million to the budget. The financial plan that will be considered also on Friday would not be able to address that, where the extra $100 million would come from.
What would be the extra $100 million? The design?
No, the construction of a replica bridge would cost $100 million more. This bridge, the program budget is $401 million. And correct me, it's approximately $100 million more to do a replica. So we would have to, besides the environmental concerns, we'd have to back up and address the financial, because we do not have that funding commitment.
Okay. Well, if that can be brought into council on Friday to show where the $100 million differential, where you're coming up with that. I haven't seen any document to address how that was priced out differently based on that. And from what I understand, the replica is only a hybrid. It's not a true replica from what was just described. But if that can be brought in on Friday, I think the key thing first is to figure out, is there significant difference than what's been circulated? And if there has been, it causes all other types of concerns at the domino effect. At that point, it makes it difficult at best. But if there hasn't been, from a technological perspective on the EIR and from a legal perspective, then if we get a ruling on that, maybe it's something that can be incorporated. Doesn't also, that could be an issue later on, that if we can amend it or include it and realize it hasn't hit that significant level, or it's at least insignificant or minor at best, or it doesn't have to change the EIR from that design perspective, then at that point, the dollar amount differential can be discussed at another point. We don't have to figure that out later, or Friday, rather. We could figure that out if you decided later in the process, once you have a final design, because it hasn't been finalized, from my understanding, what was stated earlier in this committee.
The engineering bridge type has been finalized, and that's what the preferred alternative suggests, a certain engineering bridge type. Right. I would just qualify also what the Cultural Heritage Commission is suggesting is really an aesthetic approach, because the bridge would no longer, to the best of my understanding, be eligible for historic status by the rules of the Secretary of Interior standards of reconstruction.
Here's really where this is all coming from, is that I sat through a committee meeting on Monday on this. We're sitting through it today, and then it's coming on Friday. This has been an issue that's been evolving for many, many, many years. There's all of these strategic partners. We're told the clock is ticking, yet it's coming down the pipe now without any input from this body or the council. Enough time to really ask these questions, to visit other alternatives, to look at the funding. Quite frankly, I voted no yesterday. I'm inclined to do so again today. Because when I asked if we've been working with our Congress representative, and this was a fair question in budget, were we working with our congressional representative on this? We're looking for federal funding in a federal program. We're taking a risk in gambling with taxpayer funds. We're looking at a $250 million structural deficit next year. And this is a $100 million loan and MICLA financing with no guarantee of payback from the federal government whatsoever. None. And so I asked that question, and I said, have we been working with our congressional representative? And the answer was no. And I said, can you name the congressional representative who represents that area? And we were given the wrong name. And so we haven't even really worked with our members of Congress who represent this bridge, and we're looking for a partnership with the federal government, and we don't have a guarantee from them on the funding program. And yet we've recognized this as a significant project and the biggest bridge issue on the top of the list in the entire city. And this is being slammed through council in 1 week with concern about design, with concern about funding, with no guarantees of reimbursement. I understand the time is we don't have a lot of time to weigh in on this. And that's my concern, is that these things appear to happen so quickly. Right at the last minute, we wait till the 11th hour. And while, you know, the departments have probably been working on this for years and put a pretty bow on it and then deliver it and saying, oh, by the way, you really don't even have time to read these reports. I asked in committee for the report on what are all the other bridge issues and programs and projects citywide. It was stated that it was delivered to my office yesterday. I never saw it. It was just handed me today. I didn't realize it was going to be a 3-ring binder and 6-point type, which it is. I couldn't read it with my glasses. I think we need a little more transparency on what it is and time to evaluate these things. And quite frankly, it's a 401. Well, it says million or billion. I know there was a typo.
It's a million.
It's a million.
It's a million.
Dollar project in this. That's a lot of money, and it's a lot of risk, and I think there's a lot of concern. I think you've heard it yesterday, you're hearing it again today. So I'm not quite sure what the time frame is. When is the latest you would absolutely need council approval on this project in order for everything to fall into place as you've moved forward on this? What is that date, and what's the document that ties that date?
Staff can assist me, but the current request from the federal government is December 1st that the city council approve the environmental document and financing plan.
December 1st?
Is the current request from...
That is correct.
December 1st is the request.
And when did you start working on this project?
3 years ago, right?
For the environmental, it's been almost 5 years.
Yeah.
Almost 5 years ago. So it's coming literally a week before the last time we can actually act, and it's coming for is this the first time it's going to be heard by the city council, and it's the first time it's being heard by these committees?
This is the first time that the environmental impact report and the financing plan is being heard by the city council. As you've heard, we've had a partner in this entire project, and that's Caltrans, since it is a dual bridge. I know, I'm sorry I wasn't able to be here earlier, but as you've heard also, the number of community meetings that we've had and the outreach that we've had with important partners. I think, you know, today you're hearing a difference of opinion about how the bridge should be built, and I respect that and understand your disappointment that it's coming before you. But there's been numerous meetings with the team and the associated commission and departments I've personally been involved in. And so I understand that. And yesterday personally went over to your office, met with a member of your staff. It was yesterday, and I apologize that I didn't get to personally meet with you on that, about the bridge program. So I understand that. This is definitely, we also, part of the time impact that's happened to us is the federal government within the last year, recently gave greater requirements to Caltrans responsibility, and we were one of the first projects that came to them, and they went through a subsequent second review of it, which did take many, many months to go through. So we learned it was a brand-new process, and we were the first. We would have been here many, many months ago.
And let me ask you just one final question. I mean, I understand you guys have been working hard, and I compliment you on that. And this is would you put this up there as one of the most important transportation infrastructure projects currently right now in the city or has been and identified for the last 5 years?
For the Bureau of Engineering that we're involved with?
Citywide, it's a $400 million bridge.
Well, it's definitely, yes, it's in the top 10.
So we've had delegations going to Washington virtually every other month. I think the mayor spends a lot of time and meeting with and has a lot of access with our congressional delegation and, in fact, access into the White House. Has this been on the top legislative agenda and has it been brought by him specifically to commit to those funds and the partnership?
Thank you, Councilman. You reminded me when you said, is this the first time the council is hearing about this? For the last few years, at a minimum, I know that we've brought this as part of our legislative comments that goes forwarded to the council. So I know that we have had it at the top of our radar when it comes to federal financing. So the answer is yes, we have brought it. To my understanding, we have brought it multiple times in the last couple of years, and it has been a priority regarding federal funding.
But I guess another question was, has it, though, it made it from your list, and we get those lists of legislative priorities by department, has it made it to the mayor's office to bring it to Washington and report back on what those partnerships, what did he bring back with it? What kinds of assurances do we have that the partnership exists? I mean, I think that's the real question, particularly as, you know, Mr. Huizar is the chair of this committee, and an attorney at that. I would think, he knows full well, and I've learned a lot from him, that our due diligence, and we have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the city, that those would be the concerns of any elected official, to make sure that if we're looking at $100 million MICLA financing or any type of financing program, we'd look for some guaranteed assurances we're going to get reimbursed for that, including the cost of the borrowing, and it just doesn't seem like it's there yet. So that's why I wanted to address, did those come back from Washington with any significant reports that those agreements exist?
Paul Smith, did you want to make a comment?
This particular bridge, the 6th Street Bridge, has been brought before as a position of the council to support federal dollars, monies, resources for this endeavor in the past. It's been before and we've actually had communications with Jim Clark about this bridge, and communications to Washington on this. So I think with respect to a legislative position, I think the city has done that.
Okay. Well, all right. So if we can bring that back on Friday as well, with those significant changes, and then with as well the what we've done legislatively, and so we have a history of it in the file, it would be great.
So the direction of this committee is to approve certify the EIR as is. Mr. Englander is asking to review and be prepared to discuss in council on Friday that alternative and see if that is possible, the supplemental EIR or anything else is needed. And let me say right now that I respectfully disagree with most of what Mr. Englander said, but one thing I do agree with is that this is coming to us a couple of weeks before final council action. I know that you've had to go back to the board with a number of things you've had to redo, reconsider, but let me say that I think your community outreach has been tremendous. You've done an incredible job. I know for a fact that a number of every overlapping elected official was at a number of community meetings from congressional members. You'll see Rebecca Allard's staff members were there. Our mayor had a press conference on the 6th Street Bridge 2-3 weeks ago with Senator Boxer to discuss the bridge and discuss other infrastructure problems in the city. So at least I am aware of the mayor's efforts to reach out to Washington, to work with Washington to ensure that funding is there. I don't think the mayor would have, I mean, the fact that the mayor had this press conference on the 6th Street Bridge shows the priority, shows how important this is for the city of Los Angeles. But I think you have done a good job. And it's been a tough one because I myself originally wanted to preserve the historic bridge. I needed some reassurances that this ASR thing was for real. I need some reassurances that, we couldn't replicate the bridge. Or I asked a number of questions, and I probably asked you to come back as the council member who represents this area, a number of different designs that, we would hear from the community. You guys would come back to me and tell me what it was about this, what the community is saying, and I wanted to be as historically close as possible. And I kept pushing the envelope, and you would come back to me and explain why it makes better sense to do things looking at the river being used, have it being navigable, having more space for people to recreate or possibly do other things in the river in the future, how the columns will or will not help that if we keep it and replicate what's there now or think about the future new uses. I redid my historical home and try to rehabilitate it to as closely as possible as originally made, but I put in some new cable wires here and there and put holes here and there because it's a modern living. So you do little things if you have to. If you don't have to touch the historical structure, don't. Leave it alone, great. But if you have to, it makes sense to think about not only the past, but the future as well. And I pressed you guys hard through this process. I am not as thrilled about what we're doing, but I think given a number of stakeholders, not only from Council District 14, but downtown. I know a lot of people outside of CD 14 that were involved in these community meetings and giving input, and we hear more here today. A lot of input has been given, and this is what you determined to be the best. Although I think Mr. Englander does raise some good questions about pushing the envelope even more to see if we could go back to that alternative that gives us a replication. But if you come back with answers that make sense, that's what it is, and there's nothing wrong with asking the questions and pressing you guys to try to do what we think will preserve the history of this bridge and of the city. So I think the questions Ms. Jengler asked are good ones, but unfortunately the way this city works, the local council member probably heard this before, and as in council you probably hear other questions as well from people who are seeing it or hearing it for the first time, but it's just generally how the processes work here. But I would say I do agree with one point, which is this is cutting it close to make some heavy decisions, big decisions, and having one of the most costliest infrastructure projects and having the council decide so close and so quick. But other than that, I think you guys have done a tremendous job in outreach and working with a very difficult situation. But coming back and answering Mr. Englander's questions in council, be prepared to answer those, and I've had those answered for myself, but we'll see if where the whole council feels on those. Yes.
Just would add very much like just one last thing about the Cultural Heritage Commission. They do a tremendous job, and we have a tremendous working relationship, and it pained us to recommend that there was no other alternative but to replace this bridge. And as you've heard, I'm sure, in Deborah's presentation, there's experts that believe that this is going to actually revitalize and reinvigorate the historical bridges in this downtown region. And so we're very hopeful that that will occur because these bridges are gifts to all of us, and we have been the leaders in rehabilitating all the other bridges, and so we very much believe in restoration wherever possible. I just want to thank the Commission for their leadership and their passion. We fully support them.
Okay, just for clarification, first I wanted to thank you guys, and I know how hard you work and what a great job you've done. In fact, whenever I've been out in the community and I talk about the major infrastructure projects from libraries and police stations and all the bond funds and everything we've got to deal with, or restoring any faith in local government, Gary, as you well know, you're the first one I talk about, and always saying how well your department is efficient we are, the fact that we do more with less than any other city. It's incredible how well managed these projects are, always either on time, ahead of time, or always under budget. With that, I just wanted to make sure that there was a clear understanding that there was nothing to respectfully disagree with, because I was only asking a question and a comment about what have we done. Can you report? Because I wasn't familiar with it. I wasn't implying we haven't done anything or that it wasn't part of the legislative agenda or record in Washington. I was simply asking, Was it? How was it? I took office July 1st, so don't have all the history there, but I'd like, just to, for my knowledge, what was that information? What did we do? Who did we speak with? Because these are the questions that we're going to be asked, or if the funding falls apart, because we don't have the guarantee. If it does fall apart, we can go back and say, okay, who are those folks we talked to? You got to think about the fact that in 18 months, we're going to have 6 new council members at a minimum, a new mayor, possibly a new controller. It's going to be a different city just in 18 months from now. And so with all of that, it's good to have that history. So when we go back and have to deal with this or say, oh, that funding fell short, we're knowledgeable. And so I was only making an inquiry and to find out what's been done. So, but thank you.
And we will provide that.
With those notes from my comments earlier, you've got my vote.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move this item forward with asking that you be prepared to explain the alternative, and if that's possible, why or why not.
Thank you very much.
No public comments. Meeting adjourned.